The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Trincha Pesa. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Sprott Shaw. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Go2 Productions.
Tonight on Pia.
And the term was brown bagging it. So you go to the liquor store and buy whatever you bought, and it was in a brown bag, and you took it with you and put it under the table, ordered a bowl of ice. He took my two tuxedos, lapels like this, and he said, "Richards, you're the oldest guy on that campus. If I have to drag you by the ass, I'm going to get you through those Christmas exams." And on the strength of those albums and my Saturday night dances, I generated enough work to go back in the music business.
This is going to be fun. Tonight we're going to join the current trend for nostalgia. What was Vancouver like before the internet, before urban development, before the multicultural society? And who can bear witness to the mighty changes that have transformed our little village at the edge of the rainforest into a modern metropolis that hosted the world's best Winter Olympics? When I first came to Vancouver as a little girl in 1951, Del Richards was already famous. Today, he's even more famous. I think of Del as Mr. Vancouver. He's been doing New Year's Eve gigs here for 76 years. And this past summer, Del ran the Olympic torch down Robson Street. In between, the Del Richards Orchestra has been playing at all the best parties in town. Well, it seems his dedication to living life to the fullest began with a childhood accident which left him feeling pretty low.
I was born on January the 5th, 1918, in Marpole. And Vancouver was a totally different city, of course, 90 years ago. And I had a serious accident with my slingshot. I was running down a concrete sidewalk and stumbled and fell, and fell on my slingshot and gouged out my left eye, which is rather an eventful moment. So I ran home, and eventually the doctor came, and I went to General Hospital, and he said, "No, there's no eye left." So that was in it. As a result, I had to be confined to a darkened room for several weeks to go through a period of adjustment for my good eye, as I started calling it. And I was alone in this room for, I don't know, several weeks. And grew very despondent. And nothing could seem to cheer me up. And the wise old doctor in Marpole said to my mother, whose name was Olive, he said, "Olive, you play piano and sing. Maybe your son has some musical talent. That might take him out of this depression." So my mother says, "Okay, let's find out." We took the interurban car down to Kitsilano and met with Mr. Arthur Delamont, who was the leader of the Kitsilano Boys Band, which became a very famous youth band, traveled in a good part of the world. So after some testing, it was decided I should learn to play the clarinet. That brought me out of all my depression.
Last year, Del published his autobiography, One More Time. To quote the Dust Jacket, "These are the memories of Del's life in the days when Vancouver's nightclub scene rivaled San Francisco's, and big-name Hollywood performers made Vancouver a regular stop. Del and his orchestra played every Saturday night at the Panorama Roof, high atop the Hotel Vancouver. The other great place to go in town was the Cave Supper Club, where you could see anybody from Frank Sinatra to James Brown."
The Cave had great acts, and the Palomar had great acts. You could see the biggest acts in the business by going to those two nightclubs. And the roof, panorama roof at the Hotel Vancouver, was distinctive in its own way. It was a social center of Vancouver's nightlife. That's where you went when you were serious taking out your girl. You know, you're going to spend $10. Yeah, your eyes are blinking. But it was an important social feature of Vancouver nightlife. And of course, you go to the Cave to see the Mills Brothers, Ella Fitzgerald, and all the stars, and same with the Palomar. A large part of reflected a large part of the entertainment and social life of Vancouver for a long time, and I'm so glad we were a part of it. And we, meaning me and the Roof, became famous right across Canada because every Saturday night we would broadcast in CBC from coast to coast. And the CBC announcer would come up, the CBC studios from the main floor of the Hotel Vancouver, then come up the elevator and take his position, and we'd go on with it Saturday night. And the CBC is pleased to present the music of Dal Richards and his orchestra from the panorama roof high atop the Hotel Vancouver, overlooking the twinkling harbor lights of Canada's gateway to the Pacific. It's music by the band at the top of the town.
Dal has always been popular with the ladies. His late first wife, Lorraine McAllister, was one of the best known and loveliest singers in Canada. His second wife, Muriel, is over 30 years younger than him, and she adores him. Well, we all do. That's because Dal is so sweet and perceptive, and he treats ladies with affection and respect. But most important of all, he plays the saxophone. And Dal's a romantic. He still remembers with affection a visit from the fabulous Lena Horne, who was one of the greatest jazz singers of her time.
Lena Horne was the first big star I ever saw at the Cave. And I had a good table, and it was very near. I thought I'd die. My heart was pumping in my breast. She's so glamorous, so wonderful, and so everything. Well, a few years later, we had an occasion to play a private function for her, be her band here in Vancouver. And at the end of the evening, I said, Lena, some of the guys are coming to my house out in Kerrisdale, and I'd be loved if you could join us. She said, sure. Out she came. And she was very gracious. She sat on a stool in the kitchen, just as I am, sipping her scotch and talking to everybody who came to see her and talk for a while. And our daughter, Lorraine McAllister, my wife at that time, our daughter, Dallas, was 12 years old or so, and she was sneaking down the stair and looking at what's going on downstairs in the party. So the next morning for breakfast, Dallas comes down and she's snapping her gum. And Lorraine says, Dallas, how many times I've told you not to do that? She says, well, Lena Horne does it.
On Saturday nights, my mom used to slip into her coral-colored sheath, curl her hair a la Marilyn Monroe, and step out with my good-looking dad. They'd go to the Cave where they would see performers like Sammy Davis Jr., Mitzi Gaynor, or Johnny Mathis. Then they'd cut over to the hotel van and go dancing to the Dal Richards Orchestra. By the time I was old enough to go clubbing, I would go to the Cave to see people like Bette Midler or Sting. And of course, you could still go dancing at the Roof. I used to hang out with the journalist crowd there. Great guys like Alan Fotheringham and Jack Webster. During my parents' era, the drinking laws in BC were absolutely prohibitive. You couldn't even order a drink in a club. But there was no way the Vancouver police were going to stop Vancouverites from having a good time. It was just a matter of collective subversion.
And everybody drank, and the term was brown bagging it. You go to the liquor store and buy whatever you bought, and it was in a brown bag, and you took it with you and put it under the table, ordered a bowl of ice from the hotel or wherever, a mixer, and the bowl of ice is 25 cents when we started at the hotel, and the mixer was 25 cents. So you got your drinks for the bottle price from the liquor control board, and then you mixed it at the hotel. But from time to time, the Vancouver Police Department seemed to feel obligated they should make a call on the panorama roof, and they were calling on all the establishments at that period. But we had we were one up on them because we're on the 15th floor of the Hotel Vancouver, and they had to take the elevator up. So the bellman, head bellman's desk in the lobby would see them come by and immediately pick up the phone and phone a head waiter in the roof, tell them the police are on their way. He would give me a signal and we'd immediately play roll out the barrel. Everybody rushed back to the table and stuff the bottle on somewhere behind the drapes or whatever. A little signal and thwarting the might of power of the Vancouver police force.
The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Go2 Productions. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Sprott Shaw. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Pesa.
We continue looking at Vancouver's recent past through the eyes of bandleader Del Richards. The 60s were not a good time for swing. The Beatles and the Rolling Stones were taking the world by storm, and no one really wanted to listen to Del's brand of music anymore. It was pretty tough falling from favor like that. But Del decided to survive by focusing on another end of the hotel business. But first, he had to endure the dark night of the soul. New Year's Eve, 1965.
In 1965, after 25 glorious years at the panorama roof of the Hotel Vancouver, entertainment taste had changed and the hotel let us go. We were unemployed as a big band. I could not find work for the band. It's 1965, it was Elvis, the Beatles, and they were on the charts. It all came home to me New Year's Eve, and the only gig I could get was the Boilermakers Hall on Pender Street, and I was carrying my stuff all by myself, without even the band guy, I was paid so little, up the fire stairs. My music, my horns, my music stands, my PA system, lugging this stuff up, and I sat down halfway up and thought, this is not the answer, this is not going to work. I have to look around. What I found by looking around is that BCIT was offering a hotel management course in well, it still is, called a hospitality course now. And I thought maybe I could have a fit there because I've been in hotels all my life and who knows. So I went out and had 2 or 3 interviews with the principal, and he reassured me that there were older people on the campus and I wouldn't be alone. So I thought, let's try. I'm going to school, of course, and there's a lot of homework and all that sort of thing. And the Christmas exams are coming up, and I'm nervous about that. I haven't written an exam in 35 years. So towards Christmas time, Frank Gruen, who was my statistics and mathematics teacher, started coming down to the cabaret in the hotel and sitting there waiting for my intermission. I had a room in a hotel and I'd do my homework. And he'd help me. And I finally said to him, Frank, what are you doing down here? It's Christmas time, you have a family, why aren't you home? I can remember exactly his response. He took my 2 tuxedos, lapels like this, and he said, Richards, you're the oldest guy on that campus. If I have to drag you by the ass, I'm going to get you through those Christmas exams. Yeah. Well, you have to do your best when you have encouragement like that.
So, while Del becomes the most popular hotel manager in the city, let's refocus our lens on another man whose leadership in the arts scene has created many decades of success, Mr. Bill Millard, Artistic Director of the Arts Club Theatre. The year is 1978. New ideas are afoot in the land. Bill is already running the small but venerable Arts Club Theatre on Seymour Street, where Van City Theatre is currently located. I was just one of the many actors who worked there under the expert leadership of Bill. I particularly remember playing the ingenue in a Neil Simon comedy, Star Spangled Girl. Hi, I'm your neighbor, Sophie Rauschmeier. And I was the troubled teen in a darkly dramatic production of The Effect of Gamma Rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds. It was wonderful working there, but big changes lay ahead for the Arts Club as the industrial lands under the Granville Bridge were being targeted for a fabulous new mix of urban development.
This is now 1977, 78, and the opportunity, and it actually came from my dad. I come from a fishing family background, and he had a dock right near where the hotel is on Granville Island. And he had a dock and a little office, and the fishermen would come in, and he would direct them to where they had to unload their fish. And he had, I grew up beside a cannery in West Vancouver, but this is after he'd left, he'd sold the cannery or sold the property. And he said, you know, something odd is happening down here on Granville Island, which was, of course, an industrial site. He said the federal government, and he was connected through it was a Liberal government at the time, and he had some connections. He said they're buying up leases on Granville Island. He said, I think they're intending to transform it in some way. He said, I'm not clear what, but he said, first of all, because we wanted to find a place for a shop. We didn't have anywhere to build our sets. And he said, you know, I think you can just find one of the buildings down here because they bought up the leases and the companies have moved out. And so we basically squatted. We found a building and we found the guy who was, you know, leasing them on very short-term basis. And he said, oh, sure, you can take over that particular building. And he said, yeah, and when we need it, we'll kick you out. And that was fine. We were there month to month. But anyways, they then eventually got their plan together, which is somewhat what it is today. It was going to be a mix of the arts and industry, like the cement place is still there, and the public market, of course, a market, and then marine connected businesses, and the pillars with the artisans as well. And they wanted some theater. And so they had this basically competition, open competition, for companies, theater companies, or dance companies, or even music, to make proposals for the use of these various buildings. And we put in a proposal. Alison Green, who was a designer, she arrived from Montreal and she was designing for us. Her husband was an architect, and he was connected to another architect's firm, and so they helped us put together this proposal. And we developed what basically has turned out to be what we have, which is the Granville Island stage and then the review stage next door. And we also had a shop included, of course, because that's where we were. And we were accepted. We got the, I don't know, one isn't the right word, but anyways, we were accepted. And then we raised money and got the grants and whatever and opened the building. And now that opening in the October of 1979, I would say that probably is one of the most important dates for the evolution of the company. I remember we did this it was kind of I'm sure Marlene dreamt it up. It was a kind of PR stunt. And we marched across the Granville Street Bridge because we were going from Seymour Street, which is at Seymour and Davie, right? To Granville Island, and Granville Island's obviously right below the Granville Street Bridge. So we did this march. Well, we got tons of media coverage. I have a picture of Jerry Wasserman leading, you know, banging the drum or something. And, you know, and so we were basically saying we were taking the Arts Club to Granville Island. And I think it was that kind of wackiness, that kind of, you know, we're going to succeed, that made it work. Of course, there were tough years, no question, but I think it was that commitment of everybody that ultimately transformed the company.
By this time, Dal was managing the Devonshire Hotel, but famously in 1981, the hotel was imploded. That's a sight I'll never forget, watching that famous old landmark collapse before my very eyes. So clearly Dal was now out of a job. So he began eyeing the beautiful ballroom at the Hotel Georgia, and then he decided to recreate the Dal Richards Orchestra and bring back that old Saturday night magic.
In 1981, it was imploded, the Devonshire Hotel. So I was manager of that, until it was imploded. But while I was there, I found that there was a ballroom that had been recently built compared to the rest of the building. It was an up-to-date ballroom. Very little used because the hotel was about to close, but I thought, I wonder what would happen if I started a Saturday night dance here with my band. It's not busy. And I tried it. And wonderfully successful, so successful that I took the band into a recording studio and did an album called Dance State with Dal, Volume 1, optimistically. And some of the stations were playing that kind of music at that time, and I got air exposure, and it sold well, so I thought I'll do this again. Dal Richards, one more time, Volume 2. Anyhow, the hotel was imploded, and on the strength of those albums and my Saturday night dances, I generated enough work to go back in the music business.
And now, here's our very own blast from the past, Patrick Maliha.
The Way We Were. Ah, yes, The Way We Were. It was so much better in the past. You remember the past? Way back when a lady would get pregnant and there was risk of her dying during childbirth? Oh, the glory days. It wasn't the good old days. It wasn't glorious. It wasn't just this wonderful rainbow of memories. When women said things like, I just recently got the vote, dear. Who should I vote for? We tend to gloss over things because it just makes us feel better. Nobody wants to remember things and say, so how was your life? It was horrible. I wish I was dead so I could be over it now. No, we tend to think that everything was wonderful. Yes, the good old days, back before cell phones, when if you were lost at the mall, you were simply lost at the mall. Hey, tell me, where were you? I was waiting for you at the haberdashery down at the Mall of Malls. You know, the one that was right between the ice cream parlor and the place that sells the bicycles with the giant wheels? Oh no, I was at the haberdashery that was right beside the place that sells racist paraphernalia. You know, one that sells gollywogs and that sells those Asian hats. The way we were. Remember, if you would get lost, you were lost. Where are we? I told you, this is the turnoff. Can't be. We're on a dirt road. This is no way Disneyland. Maybe they changed it. The good old days, back when somebody's like, oh, me tooth is hurting me. What do you want to do? I'd say you need to get yourself to a barber. Go to a barber because you've got a sore tooth. Oh yes, he'll remove it with pliers. Science! The good old days. I think that we just tend to gloss over and glamorize the good old days. I like the way things are now. I love the world that we're living in. The way we were, wasn't. Until next time, I'm Patrick Maliha. And this has been the Maliha Minute, which back when we started was an hour.
The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Principessa. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Sprott Shaw. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Go2 Productions.
Everyone's been to the Commodore Ballroom at one time or another, haven't you? I saw Blondie there, The Clash, Bob Geldof. The Commodore's almost as venerable as Dal Richards. And like Dal, the Commodore was out of the business for a while too. So naturally, when they reopened, Dal was there.
When the Commodore reopened 10 years ago, something like that, they called me and they said, we're reopening the Commodore, redecorated, revitalized, everything. Except the floor. They left that just intact, that spring floor. And they said, we are now getting calls from people who want to see what the Commodore looks like, who remembered it from years ago when they were in UBC or whatever, and they'd like to come to an event. And then they said, but the weekend is so solidly booked with rock bands every evening. I said, well, I have the answer for you. We can have a tea dance on Sunday afternoon. They said, what's a tea dance? So, well, we worked that out. And we had a tea dance for the opening weekend, and it was so successful. We did it for 6 or 7 weeks. And then they discontinued, stopped, informed me they'd have to stop. I said, why? The place is filled here. He says, yeah, but they don't drink any beer.
So Dal was back in action, playing the music he loves, swing, jazz, the standards, and a new appreciation was growing amongst much younger audiences for this type of music. And then there appeared a young, brilliant singer who could actually croon like the masters. So of course, Dal became a mentor to this young man who went on to take this musical style and use it to conquer the world. Michael Bublé.
There's a young audience that for whatever reason have decided to adopt that music. Not them all, of course, by far, but there is an element, and there's enough, who think that band's playing that's great music. And Michael, look at what's happened to him. I happened to be a judge of the talent show at the P&E when he appeared there, and of course we gave him first place and so forth. And I asked him to sing with the band. He sang with the band a lot after that for a couple of years. And all of us in the band thought, Michael's really going to make it. He's going to be big in Vegas. That's as far as our mentality would go. We never conceive of 20 million records being sold in Japan and that sort of thing. What a fabulous career he's had.
Vancouver is still such a young city that we can chart our history by looking at the stories of just a few generations. Dal Richards takes us through the second half of the 20th century and into the 21st. Swinging with the changes all along, Dal is a great example of how to live life fully and live it well. I'm Pia Shandel. Thanks so much for watching.
Pia would really like to know how you feel about the show. Please email us your comments at pia@thepiashow.com. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Go2 Productions. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Sprott Shaw. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Principesa.